Marcus Blake sat in his small office on Luna Station and stared at the strange symbols on his computer screen. The morning light from Earth shone through the thick glass windows of the translation center. He had been working here for 15 years and had never seen anything like these alien words before. The coffee in his cup had gone cold hours ago, but Marcus did not notice. His gray hair was messy from running his hands through it too many times. His tired brown eyes moved from one symbol to another as he tried to make sense of what he was looking at. The Corvani language was unlike anything he had ever studied. Marcus was 42 years old and had spent most of his adult life learning alien languages. Other people at the station called him the miracle worker because he could understand languages that made other translators give up. He was quiet and kept to himself most of the time. His small apartment was filled with books and computer files. About different alien cultures, the door to his office opened, and Captain Lisa Harper walked in. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and sharp blue eyes. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, and her boots made clicking sounds on the metal floor. Marcus looked up from his screen and saw the worry on her face. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said, and sat down in the chair across from his desk. "The Corvani delegation arrived this morning, and their translator device is broken." Marcus nodded and saved his work. He had been expecting this conversation for weeks. The Corvani were coming to Luna Station for the first peace talks between humans and their species. 3 years of war had killed millions of humans on the outer colonies. The Corvani ships were faster, and their weapons were stronger than anything humans had built. "How bad is the damage to their device?" Marcus asked, and leaned back in his chair. "Complete system failure," Lisa replied. "Our engineers looked at it, but the technology is too advanced for us to fix. You are the only person who has been studying their language." Marcus rubbed his eyes and thought about what this meant. The peace talks were supposed to start tomorrow. Without proper translation, the negotiations would fail. If the talks failed, then the war would continue and humanity would lose. The Corvani had already destroyed 12 human colonies and were moving closer to Earth every month. "Tell me about their leader," Marcus said, and turned his computer screen toward Lisa. "War Prime Zethkar," she answered, and her voice became quiet. "He has been fighting humans for 2 years. Intelligence reports say he has personally killed over 300 human soldiers. His ship destroyed the colony on New Boston last month." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He had studied reports about New Boston. 50,000 people had lived there, including many children. The Corvani had given no warning before their attack. The colony was completely destroyed in less than 6 hours. "What do we know about their culture?" Marcus asked, and started pulling up files on his computer. "Not much," Lisa admitted. "They are a warrior species that values honor and strength above everything else. Their society is built around military ranks and combat achievements. They have been expanding across the galaxy for centuries and have conquered dozens of other species." Marcus opened a video file that showed Corvani soldiers in battle. They were huge creatures that stood nearly 8 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in hard shell-like armor that seemed to be part of their natural skin. They had 4 arms and 4 eyes that could move independently. Their faces had sharp mandibles that clicked when they spoke. "They looked terrifying," Marcus said, and watched the aliens move with surprising speed despite their size. "They are terrifying," Lisa agreed. "But they agreed to these peace talks for some reason. Maybe they are tired of fighting, or maybe they want something from us. Either way, this is our only chance to end the war." Marcus studied the alien language symbols on his screen again. He had made some progress in understanding the basic structure, but there were still many parts that confused him. The Corvani used sounds that human throats could not make. They also communicated through chemical smells and body movements that carried meaning. "How long do I have to prepare?" Marcus asked. "The talks start tomorrow morning," Lisa said. "I know it is not much time, but you are the only person who can do this job." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Billions of human lives depended on his ability to translate correctly. One wrong word could restart the war and doom humanity to extinction. He had translated for many important meetings before, but never anything this crucial. "I will need access to all the intelligence files about their species," Marcus said, "and I want to observe their delegation when they arrive." "Already arranged," Lisa replied and stood up. "Marcus, I know this is a lot of pressure, but you are the best translator we have. If anyone can make this work, it is you." After Lisa left, Marcus returned to his computer and began working with new determination. He studied audio recordings of Corvani voices and tried to understand the patterns in their speech. The language was incredibly complex, with layers of meaning that changed based on context and social rank. Hours passed, and Marcus did not notice the sun setting outside his window. He was completely focused on the task ahead of him. Tomorrow, he would meet creatures that had killed millions of his fellow humans. He would have to sit across from them and find the right words to convince them to stop the war. Marcus saved his work and prepared to leave his office. Tomorrow would be the most important day of his life, and possibly the most important day in human history. He was just a translator, but the fate of his entire species now rested on his shoulders. The corridor outside his office was empty, and his footsteps echoed as he walked toward the residential section of the station. Tomorrow, he would discover if words could be more powerful than weapons. The first day of peace talks went better than Marcus had expected. He sat at a small table between the human and Corvani delegations in the main conference room of Luna Station. The room was large and had been specially prepared for this historic meeting. Human and Corvani flags hung on opposite walls. War Prime Zethkar led the alien delegation, and his presence filled the room with tension. Marcus could smell the chemical signals that the Corvani used to communicate emotions. His scent was sharp and metallic like heated metal. The alien leader's 4 eyes watched every human movement while his mandibles clicked softly. Ambassador Peter Cole represented the human side of the negotiations. He was an older man with white hair and a calm voice who had handled many difficult diplomatic situations. Marcus translated his opening statements about trade agreements and territorial boundaries. The Corvani listened carefully and responded with their own proposals. Marcus found that his preparation had paid off. He could understand most of what the aliens were saying, and his translations seemed accurate. The Corvani language was still difficult, but he was getting better at reading their body language and chemical signals. Both sides appeared willing to compromise on minor issues. The second day started with discussions about prisoner exchanges and colony borders. Marcus translated these conversations smoothly and began to feel more confident about his abilities. Maybe the peace talks would succeed after all. Maybe the war could finally end. An ambassador, Cole began speaking about human determination and the ability to survive difficult situations. It was meant to be a simple statement about why humans wanted peace. Marcus translated the words carefully, but noticed something strange in the Corvani response. War Prime Zethkar's chemical emissions changed dramatically. The metallic scent became stronger, and Marcus recognized it as a smell he had studied in his research. It was the scent that Corvani produced when they were excited about hunting or fighting. The alien leader's mandibles began clicking in a faster rhythm. Marcus continued translating, but felt worried about what he was observing. The other Corvani in the delegation were showing similar signs of excitement. Their 4 eyes were focused intently on the human speakers, and their body postures had become more aggressive. During a break in the negotiations, Marcus approached Dr. Emma Sullivan, who was the human expert on alien biology. She was a small woman with red hair and green eyes who had studied dozens of alien species. Marcus found her in the observation room that overlooked the conference hall. "Emma, I need to ask you something," Marcus said quietly so the Corvani could. "Not here. What does it mean when their chemical emissions smell like heated metal?" Emma looked through the glass at the alien delegation, and her expression became serious. "That is their hunting response," she said. "It means they are excited about potential prey or combat." "Why do you ask?" Marcus felt his heart sink. "They have been producing that scent for the past hour during our discussions about human resilience. That is not a good sign," Emma replied. "Marcus, I have been studying their behavior patterns, and I am starting to think they are not here for peace." Marcus stared at the Corvani delegation through the glass. War Prime Zethkar was speaking with his advisors in rapid clicks and chemical bursts. The alien leader's forearms moved in gestures that Marcus was beginning to recognize as military signals. "What do you think they really want?" Marcus asked. "Intelligence," Emma said. "They want to learn about human psychology and military capabilities. This entire peace summit might be a way for them to study us before launching a final attack." Marcus felt sick as he realized what this meant. The Corvani had not come to Luna Station to end the war. They had come to learn how to finish it. Every word he translated was giving them information about human weaknesses and strengths. "We have to warn the others," Marcus said, but Emma shook her head. "The Corvani have been monitoring all our communications," she replied. "If we try to expose them now, they might attack immediately. We are trapped in a space station with limited defenses." Marcus watched War Prime Zethkar through the glass and noticed something else. When the alien leader spoke about his own warriors, he used different tones and body language. There was a quality to his voice that Marcus had not heard before. It sounded almost like respect or admiration. "Emma, tell me about their warrior culture." Marcus said, "How do they show respect for other fighters?" "They have a complex honor system based on combat achievements," Emma explained. "Corvani only respect species that can match their fighting abilities. They view peaceful species as weak and suitable for conquest." Marcus began to form an idea. It was dangerous and might not work, but it was the only chance he could think of. The Corvani respected strength and feared superior predators. What if he could convince them that humans were not the peaceful negotiators they appeared to be? What if we could make them believe that humans are actually more dangerous than they are? Marcus asked. Emma looked at him with surprise. "How could we do that?" "Through translation," Marcus replied. "I could change the meaning of what our people say. Instead of presenting humans as reasonable diplomats, I could present them as barely controlled killers. That would be incredibly risky," Emma sighed. "If they figure out what you are doing, they will kill everyone on this station." Marcus nodded, but he was already thinking about how to begin. The Corvani language had subtle indicators that showed respect for superior warriors. If he could use those linguistic markers correctly, he might be able to change their perception of humanity. The break ended, and Marcus returned to his translation table. Ambassador Cole began discussing humanitarian laws and the protection of civilians. Instead of translating this as evidence of human compassion, Marcus began to present it as evidence of human restraint. He used the Corvani word for the mercy that apex predators showed to defeated enemies. He described human kindness as the terrifying generosity of a species so powerful that it could afford to be gentle. War Prime Zethkar's chemical emissions changed again, but this time they smelled different. Marcus continued his careful deception throughout the afternoon session. Every human statement about peace and cooperation became evidence of barely contained violence. Every mention of human history became a casual reference to unprecedented destruction. By the end of the day, Marcus could see that the Corvani delegation was responding differently to the human speakers. Their aggressive postures had changed to something more cautious. War Prime Zethkar's mandibles clicked more slowly, and his chemical emissions had become more neutral. Marcus left the conference room feeling both hopeful and terrified. His plan might be working, but he was walking a very thin line. One mistake could expose his deception and doom everyone on Luna Station. Tomorrow, he would have to continue his psychological warfare against creatures that could kill him without effort. The fate of humanity now depended on his ability to lie convincingly to the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Marcus arrived at the conference room early on the third day and spent time reviewing his notes. He had barely slept the night before because he was thinking about his dangerous plan. The Corvani language had many subtle ways to show respect for superior warriors, and he needed to use them perfectly. The morning session focused on humanitarian laws and the treatment of prisoners during war. Ambassador Cole spoke about human standards for protecting civilians and wounded soldiers. Marcus listened carefully and then began his translation using very specific words. Instead of describing human mercy as weakness, Marcus presented it as the restraint of apex predators. He used the Corvani term Krex High, which meant the terrifying mercy that only the strongest species could afford to show. In their culture, this concept was reserved for creatures so powerful that they did not need to fear any enemy. Zethkar's antenna began to twitch with interest. Marcus could smell the change in the alien leader's chemical emissions. The sharp metallic scent of hunting excitement was being replaced by something more complex. Marcus recognized it as the scent that Corvani produced when they encountered something that commanded their respect. Marcus pressed his advantage and began weaving stories of human military doctrine into routine diplomatic language. When Ambassador Cole mentioned rules of engagement, Marcus translated them as examples of how humans chose to limit their natural bloodlust. He described human soldiers as creatures who found it difficult to suppress their instincts for total destruction. The other Corvani in the delegation were showing signs of growing attention. Their 4 eyes remained fixed on the human speakers, and their body language had shifted from aggressive to cautious. Marcus could see that his psychological campaign was having an effect, but he needed to be careful not to push too hard too fast. During a discussion about medical treatment for wounded enemies, Marcus made another breakthrough. He described human field hospitals as evidence of a species so confident in its martial supremacy that it could afford to heal defeated foes. The Corvani had a similar concept called Drachmer, which referred to the overwhelming confidence of unbeatable predators. Captain Lisa Harper was observing the talks from the side of the room, and Marcus could see her confused expression. She had noticed the changes in Corvani behavior, but could not understand what was causing them. The aliens seemed more respectful, and their aggressive postures had become more defensive. War Prime Zethkar began asking questions about human military history. Marcus realized this was his opportunity to reshape the aliens' understanding of humanity. When the alien leader asked about human conflicts, Marcus carefully selected examples that would support his deception. He described the siege of Stalingrad as a casual example of human persistence in combat. Marcus used Corvani terms that emphasized how humans could fight in conditions that would kill most other species. He presented the battle as evidence that humans viewed months of urban warfare as normal. Military operations dot the alien delegations. Chemical emissions continued to change throughout the morning. Marcus could smell growing uncertainty and what seemed like the beginning of fear. The Corvani were starting to reassess their understanding of human capabilities. During the lunch break, Marcus overheard Secretary Janet Powell talking with other human officials about Earth's military history. She mentioned the world wars and the millions of casualties without realizing that Marcus was listening. Her casual tone when discussing such massive destruction gave Marcus an idea. He began to understand that humans were not just another species trying to survive in a hostile galaxy. They were the product of the most violent evolutionary environment that any known species had experienced. Earth had produced creatures that could wage industrial warfare against their own kind and still maintain complex civilizations. The afternoon session focused on territorial boundaries, and Marcus saw another opportunity to advance his deception. When Ambassador Cole spoke about disputed systems, Marcus translated the discussion as evidence of human expansion patterns. He described human colonization as the slow but inevitable spread of a species that had already conquered its entire home planet. Marcus used the Corvani concept of territorial dominance to explain human behavior. In their culture, this referred to the way apex predators gradually claimed larger and larger hunting grounds. The aliens understood this as natural behavior for the most successful species in any environment. War Prime Zethkar's questions became more specific, and Marcus could see growing concern in the alien leader's four eyes. The Corvani had built their empire by conquering species that were weaker than themselves. They had never encountered a species that might be stronger. Dr. Emma Sullivan approached Marcus during another break and whispered that she had noticed the change in Corvani behavior. "Whatever you are doing, it is working," she said quietly. "Their stress indicators are showing something I have never seen before." Marcus nodded, but felt the weight of his deception growing heavier. He was walking a dangerous line between success and disaster. If the Corvani figured out what he was doing, they would attack immediately. But if he succeeded in convincing them that humans were superior predators, they might retreat entirely. The late afternoon session dealt with trade, agreements, and economic cooperation. Marcus translated these discussions as evidence of human resource management and logistical capabilities. He described human trade networks as the supply chains that supported the galaxy's most efficient war machine. When Ambassador Cole mentioned Earth's population of 8 billion people, Marcus translated this as evidence of human breeding success. He used Corvani terms that emphasized how apex predators could maintain larger populations than their prey species. The aliens understood this as a sign of ecological dominance. By the end of the third day, Marcus could see that his psychological campaign was succeeding beyond his expectations. The Corvani delegation was showing clear signs of submission posturing. Their chemical emissions had shifted to scents that Marcus recognized as uncertainty and growing fear. War Prime Zethkar's mandibles clicked more slowly, and his body language had become noticeably more respectful. The alien leader was beginning to treat the human delegation as equals rather than potential prey. Marcus realized that he was changing the fundamental power dynamic of the negotiations. As the session ended, Marcus felt both triumph and terror. His deception was working, but he had opened a door that he might not be able to close. The Corvani were starting to see humans as the galaxy's apex predators, and that perception could have consequences he had not considered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and Marcus would have to continue his dangerous game of psychological warfare. He had transformed himself from a simple translator into the architect of humanity's survival, but the most difficult part of his plan was still ahead. The aliens were beginning to fear humans, and Marcus would have to decide how far he was willing to push that fear. The fourth day of negotiations brought a focus on military capabilities and defense arrangements. Marcus knew this would be his greatest opportunity to complete his deception. General Adam Brooks had been invited to present information about human defensive systems, and Marcus would have to transform technical briefings into psychological warfare. General Brooks was a career soldier with gray hair and steady hands who had fought in several battles against the Corvani. He spoke in the direct manner of someone who had seen combat and understood the costs of war. Marcus listened to his presentation about human military doctrine and began planning how to translate it. When General Brooks described standard defensive positions, Marcus translated them as casual displays of barely restrained destructive power. He used Corvani terms that emphasized how humans had chosen not to use their full capabilities. The concept of restraint was foreign to the aliens who always fought with maximum force. War Prime. Zethkar-S chemical emissions now showed something that Marcus had never seen before in any Corvani. The alien leader was producing the scent that his species made when confronted by superior predators. It was a smell like copper and ozone that indicated fear mixed with respect. Marcus pressed his advantage and began describing human weapons, not as tools of war, but as instruments of species extinction. When General Brooks mentioned nuclear weapons, Marcus translated this as evidence that humans possessed planet-killing devices that they had chosen not to use against the Corvani. Alien delegations' body language shifted dramatically. Their four eyes darted between the human speakers, and their postures became more submissive. Marcus could see that they were beginning to understand that they might have started a war with creatures far more dangerous than themselves. War Prime. Eskar began asking detailed questions about human history and housery. Marcus saw his chance to deliver the final blow to Corvani confidence. He had spent the previous evening researching Earth's most brutal conflicts, and now he would use that knowledge as a weapon. The alien leader asked about human, territorial disputes, and Marcus responded with carefully selected accounts of humanity's most violent wars. He described the siege of Stalingrad as a casual example of human persistence where soldiers fought for months in conditions that would kill most alien species. Marcus used the Corvani concept of total war to describe human conflicts. This was their term for the complete destruction of enemy societies, and it was considered the most extreme form of warfare. Marcus presented it as the normal way that humans resolve disagreements among themselves. When War Prime Zethkar asked about human population control, Marcus saw his opportunity to deliver the most devastating revelation. He described the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as evidence of humanity's willingness to use planet-killing weapons on their own species. The alien delegation's chemical emissions became so intense that Marcus could taste them in the air. The scent of fear was overwhelming and mixed with confusion and growing terror. The Corvani had never encountered a species that would use such weapons against itself. Marcus continued his psychological assault by describing the Holocaust as proof that humans were capable of industrial-scale extermination driven by ideology alone. He used Corvani terms that emphasized the efficiency and thoroughness of human-killing methods. War Prime. Zethkar's mandibles stopped clicking entirely, and his four eyes focused on Marcus with what appeared to be horrified fascination. The alien leader was beginning to understand that humans were not just another warrior species, but something far more dangerous. Dr. Rachel Moore had been invited to speak about human psychology, and Marcus realized this was his chance to complete his deception. She was a small woman with brown hair who studied how humans adapted to stress and conflict. Her presentation would provide the perfect foundation for his final assault on Corvani. Confidence. When Dr. Moore described human stress responses, Marcus translated them as evidence of a species that had evolved in constant warfare. He explained that humans required continuous conflict to maintain their mental health, and that peace was actually harmful to their psychological development. Marcus described human empathy as a hunting adaptation that allowed them to understand and predict the behavior of their prey. He used Corvani terms that emphasized how apex predators needed to comprehend their victims in order to kill them efficiently. The alien delegation was now showing signs of what Marcus recognized as submission posturing. This was behavior that Corvani exhibited only when confronted by creatures that they acknowledged as superior. Their chemical emissions had shifted to scents that indicated complete deference. War Prime. Zethkar asked about human methods of breaking enemy morale, and Marcus responded with descriptions of psychological warfare techniques. He presented these as evidence that humans were capable of destroying opponents mentally before killing them physically. Marcus described human interrogation methods as proof that his species enjoyed causing suffering to gather information. He used Corvani concepts that emphasized the pleasure that apex predators took in dominating their prey before consumption, that the alien leader's questions became more desperate, and Marcus could see genuine fear in his 4 eyes. War Prime Zethkar was beginning to understand that the Corvani had not started a war with another warrior species, but with the galaxy's ultimate predators. When Dr. Moore mentioned human pack bonding, Marcus translated this as evidence of a species that could coordinate massive military operations across interstellar distances. He described human loyalty as the natural cooperation of apex predators who shared hunting territories. Marcus presented human civilization as a thin veneer covering natural instincts for violence and destruction. He used Corvani terms that emphasized how dangerous it was when predators learned to work together instead of competing with each other. By the end of the 4th day, the alien delegation was exhibiting complete submission behavior. Their chemical emissions showed terror mixed with desperate respect. War Prime Zethkar's posture had become so deferential that Marcus almost felt sorry for him. The Corvani leader approached Marcus during the final break and spoke in halting human language. "Your species," he said with clicking mandibles, "are the hunters of hunters." Marcus nodded gravely and responded in perfect Corvani. "We are what we need to be." War Prime Zethkar's 4 eyes reflected something that Marcus had never seen in any alien before. It was the look of a predator who had suddenly realized that it was actually prey. The alien leader was beginning to understand that humans were not just another species to be conquered, but the ultimate evolutionary product of a violent universe. As the session ended, Marcus felt the weight of what he had accomplished. He had transformed humanity from apparent victims into the galaxy's most feared predators. The Corvani delegation was now convinced that they had started a war with creatures that could destroy entire civilizations for sport. Tomorrow would bring the final day of negotiations, and Marcus would have to decide how to use the fear he had created. He had become something more than a translator and something less than a diplomat. He was now the architect of humanity's survival through the most human skill of all, the ability to terrify others with carefully chosen words. The 5th day was supposed to be a simple ceremony where both sides would sign the peace treaty. Marcus arrived at the conference room, expecting routine formalities, but War Prime Zethkar had different plans. The alien leader stood in the center of the room with his 4 arms spread wide in a gesture that Marcus recognized from his studies. The human delegation watched in confusion as the massive Corvani began speaking in rapid clicks and chemical bursts. His mandibles moved in patterns that Marcus had only seen in ancient recordings. The alien leader was performing the Kadamor, which was a ritual submission that had not been used in centuries. Captain Lisa Harper looked at Marcus with questioning eyes. "What is he doing?" she whispered. Marcus felt his heart racing as he realized what was happening. The Kadamor was reserved for acknowledging a vastly superior species. It was the ultimate act of submission that the Corvani performed only when they encountered creatures that they could never hope to defeat. "He is surrendering," Marcus said quietly. "Not just ending the war, but surrendering his entire species to human authority." War Prime Zethkar continued his ritual speech, and Marcus translated his words for the stunned human delegation. The alien leader was declaring that the Corvani acknowledged humans as the apex predators of the galaxy. He was offering his species as servants to prevent their total annihilation. But the ritual came with a requirement that made Marcus's blood run cold. To complete the Kadamor, the strongest human present had to accept the submission through single combat. It was not meant to be a fight to the death, but a demonstration of human superiority through ritual violence. War Prime Zethkar turned his 4 eyes toward Marcus and spoke in broken human language. "You are the voice of the Hunter Pack," he said. "You must complete the Kadamor, or we cannot submit." Marcus felt the weight of every human life pressing down on his shoulders. He was a translator, not a warrior. He had never been in a real fight and had no training in combat. But if he refused the ritual, then the Corvani would be honor-bound to continue fighting until humanity was destroyed. "I accept," Marcus said. His voice echoed in the silent conference room. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Station personnel quickly converted the main cargo bay into an arena while Marcus tried to understand what he had gotten himself into. Dr. Emma Sullivan explained that the ritual combat was more about courage than skill. The Corvani needed to see that humans were willing to face impossible odds without backing down. Marcus stood in the center of the makeshift arena and looked up at the observation windows where both delegations watched. War Prime Zethkar entered from the opposite side, and Marcus was reminded of just how massive the alien leader was. The Corvani stood nearly 8 feet tall, and his 4 arms ended in claws that could cut through steel. The alien leader's natural armor gleamed under the harsh lights of the cargo bay. His mandibles clicked in what Marcus recognized as a pattern of respect. War Prime Zethkar was not trying to kill him, but to test his resolve. The ritual required humans to prove their worthiness through courage rather than strength. Marcus had no weapons except his mind and no armor except his determination. He wore simple clothing and felt very small in the large arena. But he understood that this fight was about more than physical combat. It was about proving that humans possessed the mental toughness of apex predators. The combat began with War Prime Zethkar moving in slow, deliberate patterns. The alien leader's attacks were measured and ritualistic. His claws swept through the air inches from Marcus's face, but never quite made contact. The Corvani was testing Marcus's willingness to stand his ground. Marcus dodged and weaved, but never retreated. Every time the alien leader's claws came close, he forced himself to move forward instead of backward. He could hear the clicking of mandibles from the Corvani delegation and smell their chemical emissions through the arena's air vents. The scent was complex and included notes that Marcus had never encountered before. It was the smell of a predator, species watching something that confused and impressed them. The Corvani were seeing a physically weak human refuse to show fear in the face of certain death. War Prime Zethkar's attacks became more aggressive, but Marcus noticed that they were still carefully controlled. The alien leader was following the ritual requirements and testing Marcus's psychological strength rather than trying to seriously injure him. But the claws were sharp and mistakes could be fatal. Marcus felt blood running down his arms from several small cuts, but he continued moving forward. His strategy was simple: prove that humans would never surrender no matter how hopeless the situation appeared. He had to embody the image of humanity that he had created through his translations. The breakthrough came when Marcus managed to grab one of War Prime Zethkar's secondary arms during a particularly complex attack sequence. The alien leader had left himself momentarily vulnerable, and Marcus took advantage with desperate efficiency. His fingernails scraped against the Corvani's armor and drew a thin line of blue blood. The arena fell completely silent. War Prime Zethkar stopped moving and looked down at the small wound on his arm. Then he began making sounds that Marcus had never heard from any Corvani before. The alien leader was producing the chemical and vocal combination that indicated complete respect. The entire Corvani delegation erupted in their equivalent of applause. Their mandibles clicked in rapid patterns while their chemical emissions filled the air with sense of admiration and submission. They had witnessed something that validated everything. Marcus had told them about human nature. War Prime Zethkar spoke in perfect English for the first time since the negotiations began. "You are worthy," he said while blue blood dripped from his wound. "Your species is worthy. The Corvani submit to the human pack." Marcus stood there with his own blood seeping from a dozen small cuts and felt the weight of worlds lifting from his shoulders. Both species were applauding his unlikely victory. The human delegation was cheering, while the Corvani were producing sounds of deep respect. Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor to treat both combatants. War Prime Zethkar insisted on having his wound cleaned and bandaged by human doctors as a sign of his submission. The alien leader's 4 eyes never left Marcus's face, and his expression showed something like wonder. The peace treaty was signed with Marcus's blood-stained handprint, alongside the official documents. War Prime Zethkar added his own blue blood to the signature and declared that the Corvani would spread word of human superiority throughout the galaxy. Other species would learn that humans were not to be challenged. As the alien delegation prepared to leave Luna Station, Marcus watched them with mixed feelings. He had saved humanity by convincing the Corvani that his species were monsters. The truth was more complex, but his lies had revealed something important about human nature. War Prime Zethkar approached Marcus one final time before departing. "Your words showed us what you are," the alien leader said. "But your courage proved the galaxy will fear the human pact." Marcus nodded and watched the Corvani ships depart to carry their message of human supremacy to other worlds. He had entered the negotiations as a simple translator, but emerged as something else entirely. He was the bridge between 2 civilizations and the architect of humanity's survival. Later that evening, Marcus sat in his office and looked out at the stars. He had told the Corvani no lies about human nature. He had simply chosen which truths to emphasize. Humans were capable of terrible violence, but they were also capable of restraint. They could destroy worlds, but they chose to build them instead. The translator had become humanity's unlikely champion through the most human skill of all, the ability to understand what others feared and to use that understanding to survive. He was drenched in blood from ritual combat and honored with the applause of 2 species. Marcus Blake had discovered that sometimes the most powerful weapon was not violence, but the threat of violence held in check by choice. The peace would hold because the Corvani now believed that humans were too dangerous to fight. Marcus had saved his species by convincing the galaxy's greatest predators that humanity was something even more terrifying. Apex predators who had learned to be civilized.